All right. Okay. Again, my name is Melissa Hesselmeyer, and I am one of the librarians here on camp or here at Lone Star Montgomery, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit more about research for your course. So I know that Monica had talked to you guys several weeks ago about how to start the research process and how to get more background information. So we're going to go in a little further into that process. So today I'm going to talk about, we're just going to review the Boolean operators briefly, as I know that Monica did present that to you guys when she met with your class. We're going to cover power searching, so some additional ways that you can search within the databases. We're going to talk about the peer review process, elements of a research article. We'll talk about organizing your research, how to get help, and then of course I'm going to go into a couple of the databases and show you how they work. And then we'll have time at the end for any questions that you guys may have. So just as a review, so there are some basic database searching commands that you can use, and we call them Boolean operators. And those are and, or, and not. And so and is used between two keywords, and that will give you all of the results that come back will contain both of those search terms within the record. And so that is helpful, and it helps you narrow your search results. Or is used oftentimes between synonyms or like concepts. So in this example on the screen, we have melatonin and then the scientific name for it, which is N-acetyl 5-methoxytryptamine, which I think Monica probably said it better. But when we use or, you're basically telling the database to bring back results that contain at least one of those search terms. So that's very useful when there are common names versus scientific names, or you know, researchers will use different terms based on their research background. So one example I always use is I may be wanting to do research on teenagers, but most likely researchers aren't going to use that terminology, so I can use teenagers or adolescents or young adults. So or helps expand your search results to make sure you're getting the research from both of those terms. And then not, that excludes a keyword. So the results will not contain specified terms. So another way for you to narrow your search results is by using not. Is there any questions on using the Boolean operators? Okay. So some additional searching that you all can do, which we'll call power searching, is there's something called phrase searching. And you guys may already have done this before in Google, but basically what you're doing is you're using quotation marks around phrases to help keep them together. So in my example here, I have quotations around seasonal affective disorder. And so basically that phrase searching will narrow your search results by allowing you to define precisely how you want the words to appear. And so these three words, this is a phrase, and we need these three words to be sitting next to each other in the article that we're looking for. So that's why we would go ahead and put those quotations around it to make sure that the database is bringing us back results where those three words are next to each other. You definitely can't do this around like 6 or 7 words, like a whole sentence, because that would really limit your search results, maybe not give you anything. But you do want to make it, you know, around those specific phrases that where they should be sitting next to each other. Truncation. So this is basically a symbol that you would add to the root of a word that would help you find different endings of that same word. So my example here is music, but that can return musicals, musicians. It'll return music. It will return musicality. So you can basically you can use that when a word could have multiple endings. So hopefully that makes sense. And then the last one I have on here is actually called a wild card. And so that is symbols that you would use to actually find different spellings or variations of a word. So my example here is I would put that quotation mark in where the spelling could change. So for that example, if I use the quotation mark, not quotation, question mark. Geez, guys, sorry. It's been a long day. A question mark, then that's going to return to us women or woman. That could be helpful where there are some words that have alternate spellings, like maybe, you know, in the UK that they use color with a U, but we use color without the U. So you could use that wild card in that particular instance to make sure, again, that you are getting results that are covering that keyword, but you're covering both or different spellings of that particular word. So is there any questions on using those specific power searching tools? And each database grouping will be a little bit differently. So you can actually, once you're in a database, look to see what kind of additional power searching tools that they have. But these are probably the more common ones that you would use. Okay. Oh, okay. Hold on. Yeah, just give me a second. Janu. All right, Janu, you're
Hi,
unmuted.
everyone. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I just want to make sure for the students who are listening, I want to ask you a question. You'll have to enter it into the chat box. Has anyone used, when we had these power search functions on the previous slide, have any of you used anything other than just the actual words? Like, did you try, could you go back one slide? Sorry, Melissa.
Sure.
Professor Hesselmeyer, I'm sorry.
You can call me Melissa. It seems
weird.
I know, I want to call you Janu, and then I'm like, I don't know, is this appropriate?
No, you can call me whatever. Okay.
Oh, wait, I went forward. Hold on. There we go. Can you see it?
So has anyone needed or tried to use anything other than the phrase searching? Have you been able to use truncation or the wildcard function? And you'll have to enter your answer in the chat.
So Jana says no. When you guys are chatting, make sure that you're doing it to all participants unless you do have a question for me privately. And Sylvia said she uses and or.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we may, so now what I would like you guys to try in your next set of searches, even if you think that you've found the information that you require, I'd like you to try these searches before our next time together discussing the research projects next week. And then you can mute me now.
Okay. And phrase searching, I actually use quite a bit. That's probably the most common one I use, plus, you know, the and, or, and not. I actually don't use not a whole lot, but I think phrase searching is probably the more common one that I myself use, so it's
Agreed.
helpful. All right, I'm muting you down now.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. So now that we've kind of gone over the power searching tools within databases, I want to talk to you a little bit, really briefly, about scholarly resources and what they look like. And I'm sure you guys have already had, you know, a lot of exposure to some of these resources. But scholarly publications, when we're talking about scholarly resources, the purpose of these resources are to present research. And they are often formatted. If you guys have been reading research articles, you'll know that they're very text heavy. Sometimes we'll have graphs and tables, sometimes images, but it's very text heavy. The language is always formal and specific to the field that article is written for. And the audience is definitely for professionals, for faculty, researchers, and students doing research in that area. Scholarly resources will always have citations. Formal citations are a requirement. And one example that I actually pulled from our journal listing was this Vivina Journal of Medical Biotechnology. And so that is an actual article I pulled out of that journal. But just wanted to give you an overview of what a scholarly resource is, what it looks like, before we talk about the peer review process that these articles go through. So you'll often have your professors ask you to provide scholarly peer-reviewed resources. And so what a peer review means, and I've got like a little image here that kind of shows you the steps, is the first step is that the author researches and then writes their article, writes their findings, and then they will submit it to a journal. And then once the journal receives that, they will actually strip any of the identifying information from that article and then submit it to a committee for review. And these are going to be, this committee is going to be experts in the field that are reviewing this particular article. And then once that happens, once they've reviewed it, the panel will make a recommendation whether they think that this article should be published, whether it needs some revisions before it can be published, or whether they reject it and say that it is not deemed worthy for publishing, basically. So it is a pretty lengthy process. I believe sometimes it can take a year or two, maybe even longer, to actually get the research article that you wrote published, and I'm sure Professor Houston can probably speak to that. So it is a very rigorous process that these articles go through, and so that's why these peer-reviewed scholarly resources are really great resources to use when you are conducting research. Okay, give me 1 second, Janu. And you're unmuted.
So thank you, ma'am. I would like to just follow up. So a couple of things that you all need to know is that you've heard me mention high impact or high level journals. So not all journals publish the same level of science. And so to give you an idea, if you get published in Nature, any of the Nature journals, in Science, in Cell, or PNAS, which is the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, then those are very high, top level, high impact journals. The journals, not all science is equal. And so it depends upon what the impact of your discovery or your research is on the field at large. If you've discovered something novel, then you're going to find that in very, very high level journals. If you discover something that, let's say you are following up on research that was previously published in Nature, so we already know about it, but you're finding additional information, then you would probably be published in some of these lower tier journals. Now, lower doesn't mean that it's bad science. It just has to do with the impact factor to the scientific community, if you will. And I'm going to admit, sometimes there's a little bit of politicking in there, because if you previously had dealings with other scientists at high-level events, conferences, etc., these committees, the people know the work. You get reviewed by people who know, obviously, the science. So when it's submitted to the review committee, often these scientists know one another in some way or another, and then they actually then push the people who are submitting, the scientists who are submitting the research, to make adjustments. So you almost never submit your science for the committee review without getting some kind of revision request or some kind of request to actually redo or perform the experiment again in one of the experiments. So there's a lot of work involved in actually getting your science published. All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about common elements that you will find in a research article. So the first would be, obviously, you're going to see an abstract, and that abstract gives you a brief description of the article, and that's actually really helpful when you're doing searches in the database, because that abstract can kind of tell you whether or not that article that you found is going to work for the research that you're doing. You'll, of course, find an intro and background. So again, that's the statement of the hypothesis with a review of any existing research. For methods, you'll see a description of how that research was conducted, so who, what, how. For results, it will describe the outcome of the methods, the charts, graphs, statistical analysis. Our discussions will interpret the data and then outline any possible implications. And then references, sorry guys. References, so you'll see a list of citations for the resources referenced in your article. So those are just common elements. Those can vary, based on the type of research that you're doing, versus scientific, or, or it's an English research or something like that. So some of those elements can change, but that is kind of a basic overview of common elements in a research article. So now what I always like to talk to my students about making sure that you organize your research. I don't know how many times that, Monica or I or our Cole, our other librarian, have had students come in with a document that basically just has a bunch of URLs and say, I can't get back to this article and I need to create my citation for it. So it's really important for you guys to find a way that find a way to organize your research that makes sense to you. So whether or not that's having folders in your email where you save your research articles, whether you use a Google Drive to upload those articles, whether you use folders on your desktop or actual physical folders, just come up with a way that makes sense for you. Because a lot of the URLs in our database, like if you pull a URL directly from the URL bar for a database, that won't necessarily take you back to that article the next time you log into that database. So I just want to protect you guys from losing any kind of search that you've already done. For me, my method is I actually print my articles out. I read them, I highlight them, I write on them. I do all those kinds of things. So I would suggest just saving every article that you find, whether or not you end up using it. You can always delete them later, but just make sure that you keep organized with your research. So getting help, and before we run into talking about databases and doing actual demonstrations, I just want to let you guys know how you guys can get help from a librarian, especially since we aren't physically on campus right now. So you can email the librarians. I gave you mine and Monica's direct emails, but we also have a generic email address, but you guys can reach out to us directly if you need help. We actually do have a text a librarian service, so you can actually text questions and then a librarian will text you back. You can give us a call right now. You would have to leave a message. We are periodically checking our voicemail on campus or virtually, but for campus phones, and then we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And then there's also that chat with a librarian, which is an instant message with a librarian at any time that the reference desk is open. You may or may not get a Montgomery librarian because the system, all the Lone Star College libraries log into this, but we do have someone covering reference 7 days a week. If there's nobody on reference desk, it will change. The button will say email a librarian, and then someone will get back to you the next day. So I just want you to know that those are a couple of different ways that you can get help while we're going through this process. And I also know that as you're doing research, you may want to set up research consultations with us. So I would highly suggest just emailing Monica or I directly, and we can kind of figure out how to split, because I know you guys are in groups right now, how to split the groups between us. And then we can schedule a research consultation where we just jump on a WebEx meeting and we can, talk through any issues. We can share our screens and do things like that. So just that is definitely how we can help you. Okay, and Professor Houston said, research consultations in groups is better use of the librarian time. So yes, that would be helpful, especially if you're working in a group on the same assignment. Okay, so for research practice, I'm going to take you into the library databases and show you a couple of searches in a few different databases, and then we will have some time for Q&A. Let's see. Okay, I'm just making sure that we won't get kicked out. We do have to end by 11 because I have another meeting at 11, but we will have time for question and answers. All right. So does anybody have any questions right now before we start looking into actual databases? I believe some of you have already, or probably a lot of you have already started the research process, right? Okay. All righty. All right, so right now I'm on the lonestar.edu homepage. So I'm going to access the libraries from this top bar here. Okay, and so on this on the library's homepage, there's two different ways that you can get into our research databases. So you'll see here in this blue bar, you have library catalog or research databases, so you can access them here, or you can also access them from the Find Articles tab. Also of note, we do have ebook databases and video databases, so you can go to those respective tabs and go directly to those databases. But I'm going to go ahead and click on Find Articles. And then I'm going to click on Health and Medicine. I'm going to close this thing out for every page. Okay, so the way our databases are grouped is they're grouped by subject, which you saw before we got to the health and medicine. But then they're further grouped by resource type. So we wanted to make it easier for you. So let's say I'm doing research in health and medicine, but right now I'm really looking for reference resources, and I can just pull this drop down and see some of the databases that will provide me reference resources. So I'm actually going to start in this database, and I'm going to click on Credo Reference. And this is one of our reference databases. It's a really great reference database, and it's very comprehensive. It does reference for a lot of different subjects. So since we're all working from home or remotely, once you click on that database, you're going to have to authenticate that you are a Lone Star student. So you would do that by either using your library barcode number, which is actually on the back of your physical student ID card, or you can log in using this My Lone Star username and password. So I'm going to go ahead and do it that way because I don't remember my barcode. And so this is Credo Reference. So you can just start searching a term in here. So again, this is a reference resource. It is not going to provide you research articles. It's really great for getting background information and also for getting more additional keywords that you could use for your topic. So I'm going to search for light therapy. And so what you'll notice when you conduct a search in here is that first thing is you'll get encyclopedias, dictionaries, entries for that topic, and they do come from a wide variety of different types of encyclopedias. One thing that we really like also is that on the right here is a mind map, and so if I click on that, it will make it a bigger screen, and it has my initial keyword here, but then it also gives me additional keywords, things that are commonly associated with light therapy. So this is one way that you can culminate some of those additional keywords, or further narrow your search or narrow your topic by using this resource. Yeah, I do too, Janu. We feel nerdy about it, but we do like it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Seasonal Affective Disorder Light Therapy from the International Encyclopedia of Depression. And so this really just gives me an overview on this topic, but like I said, it gives me a lot of information on different ways I can focus my research, different search terms I can use when I go into one of the research databases. So it tells me, seasonal affective disorder, but then it also gives me the little acronym. So I may want to use that in the database with or in between so that I can make sure that I'm getting those resources for both of those. Some of the other words that I can pull out of here, I know there's like phototherapy. It does talk about depression. So as you read through this, I would encourage you to just kind of write down some of those keywords that you think are going to help you as you're doing your research and kind of, okay. Have you used this, Jenny? But it does give us additional keywords, so it is really a really nice resource for that. All right, so I'm going to navigate back to my listing for databases, and I'm going to go into one of the article databases now. So I've gotten some background information. I've been able to pull some additional keywords. So I'm going to click on articles, and I'm going to start with CINAHL. And each of our databases are listed here, and they try to give you kind of a little bit of information on what the database covers. So that will help you as you're deciding which database that you need to be searching in. And often as you're researching, you'll find that you'll be using multiple databases. So it's very rarely that you will be able to use just one to get all the research you need. So okay, and of course, it's a little quicker. I don't even have to enter my login then because I've already authenticated before. So with CINAHL and with several of our databases, this is an EBSCO database, and we have a lot of those. So you'll notice very similar features in several of our databases because they are under this EBSCO umbrella. But within this database, right here on this home page, I can go ahead and enter my keywords. So I am actually going to use my phrase searching here with light therapy. And then I'm going to use my and, so my Boolean operator, and we're going to use depression. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and click search here. And so just from our initial search, you'll see that we have about 253 results. And we're able to further limit our results on the left-hand side of this database. So you'll see here on the left, there's a limit to box, and that gives us access to manipulating our search result page. So if we click on full text, what that's going to do is that is going to just provide you those resources that we have full text access to, meaning that you can read them immediately, that you'll be able to either download the PDF or look at the HTML. Generally, if we don't have full text, you can request it through interlibrary loan, but right now I don't believe our interlibrary loan is working because that's an in-person type of service. And I'm also a very impatient person, so I generally just click full text whenever I'm doing any kind of research. Okay, so you'll see that that takes us down to 104. Another thing to note is that this will also pull some resources, different source types. So we'll see academic journals, but then there's also some magazines and some additional resources. So I'm going to just go ahead and make sure that I'm searching in academic journals. And then another limiter that you'll most likely be using is this publication date over here. So you'll see right now that the articles that I have listed are published from 1991 to 2020. And so typically when we're doing research in the health and medicine field, we're needing to find those resources that are current. So 5 years is, yeah. So typically we look at five years. So I'm going to do 2015 to 2020. Now, if you're trying to get like maybe a historical background on light therapy and depression, then you could use something that's older to kind of build that foundation. But we definitely, for anything new, we want to be looking for the last 5 years. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this adolescent depression study protocol. Okay. So Jennifer says she's found some very new reports on Google. Will they also be in the library reference? Do you mean like in Credo, Jennifer? Where are the reports coming from? Oh, okay. So you're talking about like Google Scholar, possibly? So we may or may not have access to those journals through our databases. We can do a journal search to see. So that really it will really just depend. So if you find something like that, you can email Monica and I, and we can help look into that to see if we have access through our databases. Okay. All right, so as I opened this record here, you'll notice that we have our abstract here. So again, like I mentioned earlier, this is really great information on how to, on what this article is covering. So that can be very useful for you. You'll also notice that there are some subject terms associated with this article. So if this article is a really great article, you can actually pull additional keywords or subjects from this article to search further in the databases. On the left side is where you'll access the full text of the article. You can either open the PDF and download it. You can also get an HTML version of the article. And then on the right side, we have a lot of tools. So we can actually save this article directly to your Google Drive. You can create folders in EBSCO, but you have to log into EBSCO to get to them. So I really don't do this. I just as an extra login that you have to create, but that is an option. You can print or email this article. You can save it. Remember how I was mentioning earlier that this URL up at the top, that won't take you back to this particular article? Well, if you use this permalink here, that's a permanent link to the article, and you can save that. So if you want to do it that way, just make sure that you were looking for a permalink type link, URL, sorry. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention for tools is that this has, as many of our databases have, a citation tool built in. So I'm going to click on Cite, and then you will notice in EBSCO especially, you can pick a gajillion different types of citations. Maybe not a gajillion, but it's quite a bit. So for this class, I believe we decided to use APA. So you can copy and paste that into your reference page. But anytime that you are copying and pasting a citation out of a database, you will always want to double check it against a reputable citation source. So we have some of those on the libraries page. We also have one in the research guide, and I can send Professor Houston an APA handout that she can link to in D2L. So you would just double check that citation with what you copied out of the database. Because I have seen some issues where you have to basically like either change the capitalization or punctuation or something like that. So just be aware of that. You definitely need to make sure you're double checking it. So any questions on this particular database? Yeah, I'm going to write that down, Janu, so I do not forget. APA handout. Okay. So the last one I was going to show you today is going to be Academic Search Complete. And this one is our most comprehensive database. So you will see it in database listings for quite a lot of the different subjects that we offer on campus. So this one won't necessarily be health and medicine focused, but it will search health and medicine resources as well. So I am going to pull in now, I want to look at phototherapy. And I'm going to do the seasonal. If I could type, that would help. Affective disorder. Okay. And hopefully it will. There we go. Just a little slow. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, this is another EBSCO database, so very similar functionality. So on the left here, I've got my full text that I can limit to. And then you'll also see a limiter for scholarly peer-reviewed journals. Apparently it's going to be super slow. There we go. Okay. And then I'm also going to manipulate my publication date here. So I'm going to do 2015, and the most recent is 2019, it looks like. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this effects of light therapy on mood and insulin. Or no, this is the one I want to look at. The effects of bright light with reduced light on sleepiness. So same layout here. We've got our abstract. Again, those additional subject terms. There's circadian rhythms, which I know is one of the things we were talking about when we were coming up with potential topics. Your full text over here, and then your tools on the right-hand side. So one thing that I did want to mention is, depending on some of your topics, you may want to step outside of the health and medicine database grouping and go into some of the others. So because, for example, this topic does talk about the affective disorder, seasonal affective disorder, which is a psychological disorder, you may actually want to pop into some of the social science databases and see what kind of articles they have and what kind of research is happening in that grouping. So you won't necessarily stick to just the health and medicine depending on your topic. And if you're not sure, where you should be looking, what types of what grouping you should go into, you can definitely contact Monica and I, and we can definitely help you pick where else you might want to try searching for, because I know that we're able to find some of these resources in our psychological and social science database. So just know that you're not limited to just the health and medicine, and it will vary based on the topic that you are writing on and how you're focusing that particular research topic. So does anyone have any questions? And I can unmute everybody. Let's see. I wonder if I can unmute everyone. Figure out how to. Well, I'll just leave. Does anyone have any questions in the chat? And then if you prefer, I can unmute you if it's easier. But just let me know in the chat if y'all have questions. So Yana, you would double check your citation. So if you're copying it out of the database, or I know some students use citation generators, there are errors in what comes out of those. I've noticed errors in some of the stuff I've pulled out of Academic Search Complete. Not always, but sometimes there are. So you want to make sure that you're looking at a reputable source example so that you can make sure that that citation that you pulled out of the database matches what it should look like. The most common thing I've seen is that maybe the title of the source is, or the title of the article is in all caps, and that is not how it should be formatted in APA. So normally it's pretty noticeable, but it's just a good practice to make sure that you're double checking. Because they're computer generated, there's definite issues sometimes. Yeah, and we really don't recommend using a citation generator just because there are a lot of errors, but I wouldn't rely on them. You're welcome. Janu, do you want to add anything? I can unmute you. And then I'm going to have to hop off in a couple minutes. And like I said, I'm recording. Once I get the link for the recording, I will share that with Janu, and she will share that with you guys. All right, Janu, I'm going to unmute you. You are unmuted,
okay,
my friend.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Professors Kamek and Hesselmeyer. We are so appreciative of this. It's actually really good information. You guys, you must use your resources. So those are your librarians. Use them. They know so much more just off the tops of their heads. So we're going to schedule times. Even if you think you know what you're doing, you're still going to schedule times to meet with them after the 13th. It's getting close to 11, and both of us are going to be bumped off to get on to other meetings. But I wanted to let you know that we will come back and review items that were presented today. So even if you have questions or you think of questions later, write them down, email them to the librarians and or to me, and we'll get back to those. You'll hear from me by the end of the weekend. Thank you, professors.
Thank you, guys. And thanks for dealing with a little bit of stumbling. Like I said, this was my first live session, so I know I'll get better.
You were great. You were great. That was good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, please reach out to Monica or I so we can help you with your research. All right.
Thank you.
All right.